and thanks for joining me today. My name is Lynn, and in today's video, I'll be making 2 desk calendars using the Photo Play A Year with My Gnomies calendar kit, which did come in our Paper Sweeties first quarter sweet kit. I'm actually going to be making both calendars in this video. The construction of them will ultimately be the same, but as I flip through each of these, you'll see that the calendar portion is actually a little bit different. So on this one, I actually printed out the calendar grid and pre-filled the dates with 2022 dates. The first one that I showed, I used the 6x6 calendar grid that is part of the printed pattern papers, and that version does not have the dates filled in. So I thought it might be nice to kind of have both options, and I'll be gifting these to family and friends, and so with the undated one, they can choose whether or not they want to use it this year. Maybe they even want to hang on to it and re-gift it as a Christmas gift at the end of this year. So, and I'm totally okay with people re-gifting things that I make for them, because I'd rather, somebody use it, and if they don't need a calendar, I'd rather they give it away to somebody. And the calendar itself is 6 by 9, and I chose that size because this printed calendar here is 6 by 6 already, but I wanted to add a decorative panel, and I chose to add an additional 3 inches because that just makes things a little bit more efficient in terms of cutting down papers, because if I'm working with a 6x6 panel, for example, if I cut it in 2, that gives me 2 3x6 panels. So that works out really well, considering I made some other projects. For example, I made some mini Slimline cards, and I made my mini Slimlines so that the decorative matte layer would be 3x6. So the mini Slimline card itself was, I think, 3¼ by 6¼ So by cutting, that's how I arrived at this calendar size. Certainly you could leave it as a 6x6 without the decorative panel on the left, but I thought that I wanted to really keep that gnome theme, and so I wanted to be able to add some of the gorgeous decorative papers to both of these calendars. So what I will do is I will set the decorating portion of this video on super high speed, because this is another one of those videos where I have over 4 hours of video footage. And so with the decorating portion, there's not a ton to describe in terms of what I'm doing. It's very formulaic in terms of the layout that I'm choosing, and so it doesn't require too much explanation. But later on in this video, I do show how to create the folded desk stand and how I bind these calendars. So what I'll do is I'll leave a timestamp in this description box, and that way when you hover over the timeline of the video, you should see little markers where I've bookmarked each sort of segment of this video. So if you want to kind of skip the decorating, then and then jump straight to the actual construction of the desk calendar, the stand and binding and all of that good stuff, then do feel free to do that. What I'll do is I'm gonna go ahead, and as this is going on high speed, I'll set it to some music, but then I'll rejoin you with a voiceover when it comes time to the desk calendar construction, so I can explain what I'm doing. Okay, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the decorating. Okay, so now let's make the desk stand itself. These pieces are lightweight chipboard, so I've already cut out 4 pieces. I have 2 pieces that are the same size as my desk calendar, each monthly spread. That's 6 by 9. And then I have 2 strips that are 1 1/4 by 9. And I happen to buy 65-pound weight paper in 11 by 17. It's a little bit more cost effective than buying it in 8.5 by 11. It's actually double the size, but not double the price. So I just cut it down as needed. But for projects like these where I'm covering larger elements like this, having these larger sheets is actually pretty useful, as it turns out. But if you don't have large paper like this, one, you can glue 2 pieces of paper together to have a large enough piece, or 2, you can individually wrap your segments of lightweight chipboard and then adhere them with a hinge. So lots of different ways of covering this. Essentially, we're going to cover these 4 pieces as if this was a mini album of sorts. So I'm using this glue stick. It's an Elmer's glue stick, but it's actually their extra strength craft bond. And it's nice. It's acid free, it's photo safe, non-toxic, all of that good stuff. Fairly decently strong hold as well. And I figured that since this is a calendar that is meant to be used and then tossed at the end of the year, I don't really need to use really, heavy duty adhesives or heavier weight chipboard. I think this lightweight chipboard is plenty thick enough to give it stability and sturdiness to stand up on the calendar and hold the weight of our calendar pages. So I've glued down my pieces and gave it a really good burnish, and now what I'm gonna do is just trim off a little bit of that excess paper and miter my corners. And what you saw me do, I forgot to explain, was I did space the chipboard pieces using some scrap pieces of the exact same lightweight chipboard. I think had 3 pieces of lightweight chipboard as a spacer. And the reason why we need that space is because we need to fold our desk stand where you see the gap between each of these segments of chipboard. And by leaving that gap there, there's enough paper to actually bend and fold down. If these pieces of chipboard were butt up right against each other, there's no extra room there, and so the what will end up happening is your cardstock will end up tearing and ripping because there's just not enough tension to make that bend. And so now that everything has been trimmed, I'm gonna start to adhere down these flaps. One thing I didn't know is that when you miter your corners, don't cut all the way to your chipboard. As you can see, hopefully, I've left some cardstock about 2 thicknesses in terms of the width that I've left, and that way you're certain that the corner will actually be covered with cardstock, because if you trim your paper all the way to those corners, then you may end up with an exposed corner where your chipboard will show through. And here what I'm doing is, because I can't get my bone folder into these center lines here where I need to put folds, I wanted to actually score the line to start breaking down the paper fibers. And as I continue to construct this, I'll just continue to kind of gently fold, gently get the papers to take that shape, to take that form. along the edges, I was able to kind of use my bone folder and just gradually fold that paper up. But since I can't get access to those interior folds, using my scoreboard and the scoring tool helps to achieve the same thing by breaking down the paper fibers and putting a nice straight, crisp line there to fold along. Okay, so now that everything is covered on the one side anyhow, we still need to cover this inside. Even though it's on the inside, it's still going to be visible. So you want to make sure that that it gets covered. And there you saw I was able to fold everything flat eventually. So so this project ends up being kind of nice because you can fold it down completely flat and kind of put it in a bubble mailer and mail it if you're making this as a gift. So it's not too bulky, especially since it does have those, since the stand is collapsible essentially. So what I'm doing is, again, cutting myself another piece of 65-pound weight paper. Again, I'm cutting it from my 11 by 17. And the height of this is going to be 8 7/8, so just shy of the 9-inch height of my desk stand here. But the length of it, you'll have to kind of determine that because it really depends on how much of a gap you've left in between your pieces of chipboard. So that's why I took my piece of cardstock to my project and just eyeballed where I needed to trim that off, and then I cut it in my on my trimmer. If you don't have like a glue stick like I did, you can always use your double-sided adhesive tape like I am here. I just like to make sure that each of the 4 edges of each cardstock or lightweight chipboard piece has good adhesive and is a good stick. So I've got adhesive going around the 4 edges of my cardstock, and then along the vertical edges of my chipboard pieces on the inside, I've put double-sided adhesive as well. So you can definitely use whatever adhesives you have. Liquid adhesive would be really great too. A lot of times I use that when I'm making mini albums. I use score tape for my mini albums a lot as well. But I figured with this project, since it is meant to be something that has to last the 12 months of the year, but after a year, it's probably going to get tossed. So unlike a mini album where I'm trying to construct something that will last over multiple years, this project I know, is eventually going to get thrown away. So that's why I don't feel like I need to use my score tape, especially since score tape is pretty expensive, especially as compared to an Elmer's glue stick. So I do keep in mind sort of the longevity of my projects, or at least my desired longevity for a project, in when I determine or decide on the quality of materials that I'm using. I want everything to have a really nice, clean, professional finish, but still, you can have that without breaking the bank in terms of, the cost of everything else that you're using. Okay, so now I'm going to cut myself a couple more pieces here. This is slightly heavier weight cardstock because it will be the cover to my calendar. Because as you saw previously, I've only decorated each of the 12 months. So I haven't yet decorated the cover. You'll see that in a bit. Once I finish binding. So I purchased the We Are Memory Keepers cinch machine earlier this year with a couple of specific projects in mind, but now that I have it, I've been using it more and more, and I'm so glad that I got it because it really does come in handy, I think. So what I'm doing here is with just a plain copy paper, I'm just doing a test run. So I've cut myself a piece of copy paper down to 6x9, and I highly recommend doing a test run on any project that you want to bind before you start punching holes in your actual project. So here, this is the desk stand. I know you can't see the desk stand in full, but I punch through that, and now I'll punch through all of my pages. So in this first pass, I am punching all of the holes, and because my project is so wide, I'll need a second pass to punch the remaining holes. But I don't want to have to move that guide back and forth. So I'm going to punch everything that I need to punch for both desk calendars, and then make one adjustment to the guide rail there, and then punch the rest of what I need. Now, I definitely recommend, especially for projects like this where you're punching through a lot, periodically empty out the tray that collects the little hole punches, and also do what I'm doing here, clean out these punches, because sometimes, as you can see, paper gets stuck there, and that can make it a little bit harder to punch through your project. So you don't want that to accumulate too much. Okay, so now I'm going to pull out this guide all the way to the left, as far as it will go. I'm going to set my project in, and on the left side there's actually a little lever that I'm pushing down. That actually locks into a previously punched hole. And so that was my cover piece that I punched through. So your cover, you need to actually punch holes through the front and the back. So bear that in mind. Both of the 9-inch edges need holes punched through them. And you should be able to see the 6th peg here. It's actually sitting further out from the rest of the pegs. I pulled that out for the second pass of hole punching because I do not want that hole to get punched. It's very close to the edge of my project, and I don't want to risk having just a partial hole get punched. And even if a full hole gets punched, it's going to not look even with the other end. And so that's the nice thing about the cinch. You can really kind of customize this to punch any size, any length of project. And by just adjusting and pulling pegs out or pushing them in, you can determine what holes get punched and which don't. And the other thing that you could do is, so I chose to have holes running along the entire length of my desk calendar. But if let's say you have like leftover segments that are only 3 or 4 inches long, you could, if you wanted, have 2 stretches of coil just along the left and right edge, and punch your holes in that pattern. So it's really up to you. But the cinch is great in that way. It gives you that flexibility. So when I load this, here's the thing with loading your coil. So what I have found is, one, always double check the order of everything. So making sure that as I load this in, everything's in the correct order. I put my desk stand down first, and then I loaded from January to December, so reverse order, face down. And that way I'll flip my desk stand to the back, and that will hide the edge where the coil gets crimped together. So you get a really nice finish that way. Okay, so now that the desk calendar is pretty much complete, so it's bound, it's operational, and all of the pages are decorated, but I still do want to add a nice little cover to this, even though you're only going to see it for a little bit, and then you're going to quickly move on to each of the calendar spreads. But I still want this to look nice because it'll be the first thing that the person getting this will see. So what I did was, on the paper pad itself, this was the title image, A Year with My Gnomies, and it's got the two gnomes on either ends. And so I just fussy cut that straight from the title page of the 12x12 paper pad. I thought it was just so cute, and also just a perfect title for our calendar as well. So I've just backed that onto some solid color cardstock, and on one of the sheets of 12x12 papers, we get some really nice cut apart elements, including border strips. These 1/2-inch border strips are really, really nice. I use them a lot throughout my project. And it accidentally grabbed here, and I had to be really careful to, you can see how strong my adhesive is because I didn't even push down, and it and it grabbed so tightly that I had to kind of use my little tool there to get it to come off the paper without ripping. But as I was saying, the strips are really nice, little border segments, and so I used them quite a bit on my various calendar projects. And I don't think I've mentioned, but I did make 5 calendars using this kit. So I've got the wall calendar, which you should have seen yesterday. These 2 desk calendars, and if you caught my showcase, you'll also know that I created a planner style calendar and also a pocket calendar, and I'll have those videos up shortly as well. So if you want to see how I made those projects, I've got tutorials on those as well. So with this title page, I kept it really nice and simple. I didn't feel like it needed too much more. And this is the spread that came with the 6x6 printed calendar grid that's undated. And so I think it makes for a really great present because I could either just have this ready to give, any year, and it's going to not kind of expire in that sense. But also, whoever I give this to, if they don't actually use a desk calendar, but they know somebody who does, they could hang on to it and then re-gift it. And then for my second version of the desk calendar, again, so you can see this folds down all the way nice and flat. And because we left that space between each of those chipboard pieces, it folds down really well without any sort of tension. But this is the second version, which I did date specifically for 2022, so that's why you see the year there. And I basically laid this out exactly the same as the first one, but instead of using a pre-printed calendar, I just printed one out myself to the same sort of dimension of 6 inches wide. And I used for each of the monthly headers, we did get that as a strip on one of the 12x12 papers for each of the months. So that came directly from the calendar kit. And then, of course, the additional decorative elements were also from the calendar kit. So those are my 2 desk calendars. I think they're really fun projects. They take a little bit of time to make, but really they're fairly simple projects. It's just decorating 12 calendar spreads can take a little bit of time. So I hope that you enjoyed this project, and if you did, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you want to catch new videos as I publish them, click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Thanks so much. Bye.